Hey there, Bourbon Real Talk Plus. Randy Sullivan coming to you today with an interesting piece of bonus content. So, I have heard a few times throughout the years that there is such a thing as corked whiskey. So, for those of you who spent any time in the wine enthusiast world, you have heard of corked whiskey. It's basically a compound, commonly referred to as TCA, that comes from some sort of chemical reaction with some form of chlorine, which can be a preservative or something that's in the wood. And it puts this off note into usually wine. But I've heard of it being in whiskey. And the other day, the last time I did pick up with pours, one of the Someone Say Whiskey members came over and dropped off this bottle of Corked 1792 single barrel. I have smelled it, I've tasted it, it is definitely tainted, and I started doing some research on it, and I'm going to do a full podcast episode on corked whiskey, mainly because people believe that whiskey can't be corked because of the higher proof of whiskey killing the fungus or bacteria that creates the TCA, and that is true. The fungus and bacteria cannot live in high proof spirits. However, the fungus or bacteria does not have to be present for it to have already imparted the TCA chemical into the whiskey and therefore tainting the whiskey. In fact, I found out that it's not always a cork. It is possible for a bottle that has a synthetic seal to actually have TCA in it, because it can come from the wood pallets that the barrels are stored on. It can even come from the filters that they use for chill filtration of whiskey, which was all news to me. Found it super fascinating. Going to do a full-length episode. But what I'm probably not going to include in the episode, unless this goes smashingly well, is they said that this compound TCA is it's polarized, and as a result, it is extremely attracted to the material that you make saran wrap out of. Polyethylene, I think, is the term. And so they said that one of the things that you might try to do if you end up with a corked whiskey is to put it in cellophane. And the cellophane may very well attract all the TCA chemicals to it because of its natural polarized state, pull it out of the whiskey, and correct the flavor. So what we have here is a 3-flight tasting. What I'm going to taste first is going to be my control sample. Unfortunately, my corked bottle was a single barrel, not a single barrel bottled in bond. And so the proof on the cork sample is 98.6. The closest I could get was a 100 proof bottled in bond. So we're going to use this as our control. Then we're going to taste the corked sample that we treated with the polyethylene. And then we are going to taste the actual cork sample to see if we can identify a difference. And I did use a ceramic vessel to do the soaking. I probably don't need that much, so that there was no chance that there were going to be any other secondary chemical reactions because of the vessel. So, all right, let's start off with the regular bottle and bond. Pour the usual. See what I did there? Per the usual, 1792 single barrel is delicious. Now let's try the corked sample. It still does not smell right on the nose. And it's a little bit of a earthy, musty, funky flavor. And when TCA levels are real high, what's interesting about TCA is humans are super sensitive to it. And so you can identify it when it's as low as 4 parts per trillion, not million, not billion, 4 parts per trillion. And so we're super sensitive to it. But I'd be curious to see, because this has that earthy aroma to it that I got from my 2023 George T. Stagg, and I'm starting to wonder whether or not I don't have a corked bottle. So we may do some secondary experimenting with that. Certainly tainted. Yeah. So it's got all of the banana runts flavor that the bottle and bond has, mixed in with the vanilla and the honey. But in there is that weird, earthy, like potting soil type flavor. And let's try the untreated sample. Go back and forth here. I would have to say that if the cellophane did anything, it was so faint that I would have to call this experiment a fail. I mean, and this bottle isn't super corked. Like, you can tell that it's off. I've tasted bottles of whiskey that had this level of taint to them before, and the distillery just thought like, oh, well, this is just a unique barrel, right? They didn't really consider it a taint. Yeah, I'd have to call this experiment generally a fail. I mean, if it made a difference, it was so slight that I don't think that you could take a truly tainted bottle and fix it and be happy with the cellophane. But it was an interesting experiment. Hope you guys found this interesting. As always, I have to say thank you so much for your Patreon support. This channel, Chrissy Lynn, who is a single mother who is employed by the podcast. We couldn't do all of this without you, and we just want to say thank you again for all of the support. And as always, we love you guys.